What is up, everyone? Welcome back to the Her Hoop Stats podcast. Tyler and Brittany here with you yet again for another one of our daily episodes here every day through the weekday. And we are here to talk about some undefeated teams. We got some that are ready to play, whether it be tonight or tomorrow. And we have the undefeated team right now in the country in UConn, sitting there at number one. And Brittany, I think just to start us off here, we got to ask the question. Just obviously, we're kind of looking ahead now because UConn has some games on the horizon, has some games that's already been passed. Can UConn go undefeated this season?
The initial answer for me is yes. Just looking at what they have upcoming, we were kind of talking about just the strength of the Big East, and I went back and looked, and they haven't dropped Big East game since February of 23. And so I think in a season where, as of now, I don't think there's someone that's probably going to really challenge them in the conference season. And when you look ahead, they still have Iowa upcoming, which, that's the end of this month. And then January, they're going to have Notre Dame. And then the first part of February, they have Tennessee. But I would say just in a general, month and a half into the season outlook of those teams that they have upcoming, I don't think they're at a point where they're probably going to pose a really big threat to this UConn team.
Right. Yeah, no, I'm with you. I mean, and really to no fault of UConn for their scheduling in a lot of ways, but obviously USC looks different without Juju Watkins. Ohio State has transfers coming out. Like there's just teams on this schedule that in theory we're probably expected to be a little bit better, just being frankly, in terms of when you're scheduling ahead. And UConn, besides that Michigan game, which I think Michigan has turned out to be just a very good basketball team, it's been pretty smooth sailing. And I'm right there with you where it's like, I'm not really seeing the game where it's like, oh, this is where you get tripped up. Like, certainly you have games on the schedule that are going to be worthwhile. You have at USC. You go and play Iowa. You have Tennessee on the schedule still left. You have Notre Dame, right? Like you have these games where it's like there's star players here that can go and have those star player games where it's like that you can't go and you can't overcome that from your the defense of it. But UConn has two star players right now that are just on a different level. I mean, AZ Fudd, the 3-point shooting. This is more than like being a specialist. This is being an expert. This is otherworldly right now. Over 6 attempts a game, over 50% per game. That's not normal. It's not even like fully easy shots either. Like where it's like just being fed to it. Like that's not what we're seeing here. And yet the ball just kind of keeps going through the net. And then that's not even getting into the fact you have an absolute game breaker, a generational player in Sarah Strong that is on any given night can give you a 5x5 stat line and just absolutely stack the sheet on offense and on defense. And you go down the roster from there, and it's still UConn. Like it's still an absolutely ridiculous talent pool on this team. I don't see it. I don't know where the game lies in the regular season through the Big East tournament, and until the Final Four, where like you're really going to see a team that can truly compete with UConn. Obviously, there's potential for slip-ups. You can have an off night, but on paper right now, I don't see anything close, frankly, to a team that can really match the level of talent that this UConn team has. And again, there's a lot of different circumstances that have caused that in that way. For you, with AZ and Sarah, and what has been most impressive from them and how they've kind of taken steps this season to you?
Well, I think with AZ Fudd is I go back to that conversation, that was kind of with her and Gino that he, really challenged her. Like, I don't think you've become the best version of yourself here. And which is really why she came back this year. And now you're seeing her in the best version of her right now at UConn. And for someone, I've said this so many times, like if you ever want to watch someone shoot a basketball and learn how, whether it's male or female, like AZ Fudd is someone you could just go study because that shot is so pure. She has such a quick release. But I think also she's improving other parts of her game this year as well. And that's like the scary thing for this UConn team is you talked about it like, yeah, maybe they'll have slip ups, but every team is getting better.
Hmm.
And throughout the year, like that is your goal, is that you're going to be playing your best in March. And so when you keep thinking about like, okay, AZ Fudd through, this many games is looking like this. And then you have Sarah Strong, who is just a sophomore, but like you said, in every statistical category is just incredible
Hmm.
and going to keep getting better. I think that's what, like, to me makes it seem really hard to even envision a team that's going to give them a great challenge until, like you said, the Final Four, because of what they have. And then, like you said, we hadn't even gone down the depth of the roster.
Hmm.
You have KK Arnold playing better than she really ever has in a UConn uniform. And especially at the point guard spot, which I think was kind of a little bit of the unknown. Like, you
Sure.
lose Paige Beckers, she's stepped into that role and really, done a great job for this UConn team. So
Hmm.
I don't know what it looks like when a team challenges them, because outside of Michigan, where they had a pretty comfortable lead, and Michigan, incredible guard play, hit some, shots by
Right.
Silas Swords. What does that look like?
Hmm.
I'm sitting here, I don't even know that I see a team challenging that until you, like you said, in a situation like the Final Four.
Yeah, and that's kind of the point I'm thinking, where it's like it took that ridiculous game from Sila to make that a game, right?
Yep.
And obviously that first quarter for Michigan, when you're looking back on it, was not ideal by any means, right? But that was potentially the thing that I think coming into the season. You mentioned the point guard spot, and kind of hand in hand with that was the perimeter defense of
Yep.
UConn, because Paige was guarding the best player every time that they were, whoever it was, pretty much any time, as long as it wasn't a five, Paige was probably guarding them. And figuring out how do you how do you slot that back in, right? And that's another thing where I think AZ has done a phenomenal job of stepping up, is on the defensive side of the ball as well. And then you see just the team defense from UConn as well, which is not anything new. It was just a question of like, how is it going to look
Hmm.
without Paige Beckers this year? And it looks like UConn, and that's the
Yep.
scariest thing, is that this looks like UConn again, and it's different now, than past stacked UConn teams, in the sense of I think that there's more talent widespread now than ever. And so it's not the same level of like maybe feeling of like inevitability with UConn, but goodness, in terms of like looking at UConn in a vacuum and like what the star players are doing, if it's that level of like when we were in that UConn era of inevitability, that's
Yep.
the level of play you're getting from the star players right now. And it might not feel like that in the same way because of everyone else, and everyone else being really good, Texas, South Carolina, UCLA, whoever. But in terms of looking at this regular season schedule, it feels pretty safe to say, like, unless there's another superstar performance, I don't see where the slip up is going to happen. I've been
Yeah.
very impressed by UConn so far. Um,
Yep.
I will say though, one team that is on the schedule is potentially going to be undefeated or not tomorrow. Iowa and Iowa State. This is, to me, I think, like the most like underrated game in women's college basketball. I love this rivalry so much because so many of the rivalries in women's college basketball are like based on prestige and
Hmm.
greatness, and it's like UConn, Tennessee, UConn.
Yep.
Really, it's UConn versus whatever the other school was really good at the time. Like generally speaking, this is just real in-state college rivalry, and I absolutely adore it. You have two
Yep.
fan bases that are elite fan bases that travel, that pack the place, and you have two really good teams this year, in Iowa, in Iowa State. Just to lead us off, just generally, like, what are you looking for in this game? What are you excited to see?
Well, I'm excited to see the post matchups.
Hmm.
I think through this part of the season, Audie Crooks really hasn't had the post presence to really make an impact on
Sure.
what she does on the offensive end. I mean, her numbers and her stat lines have been truly incredible up until this point in the season. But now you're going to see an Iowa team that has depth in the post. You have Hannah Stolke, you have Ava Hayden, you have all those players that are
Hmm.
going to make a difference. And I think that's going to be really interesting. But I think really the key, in my opinion, for the Iowa State Cyclones is Addie Brown.
Hmm.
Now she isn't necessarily one that's going to eye pop you with numbers in terms of scoring, but she's had a triple double this year. She has flirted with a couple other ones, and she really has to be on the floor, I think, for this Iowa State team in a matchup against Iowa for them to be really successful,
Mhm.
because she is going to be asked to guard Hannah Stolke, which is, by far probably Iowa's best player.
Yeah.
And then on the offensive end, just so much of what they do, and her passing into Audie Crooks is so pivotal. And so that to me is going to be the really important matchup. But I'm also interested in the guard play. It'll be really interesting if Chit Chat Wright is back
Mhm.
for Iowa. You have Jada Williams, the transfer from Arizona, in for the Cyclones. So that's going to be a really fun matchup to watch as well. But I think, like you said, as someone who was born and raised in Iowa,
Mhm.
I think this is just always fun. And what's been really incredible is obviously I was an Iowa State fan growing up, and women's basketball has always been really important at that
Mhm.
school. But we all know ever since Caitlin Clark kind of came to
Right.
Iowa, that fan base has, really, really embraced the Hawkeyes. And now you get two matchups. You have undefeated teams. Like, that's going to be an electric atmosphere at Hilton Coliseum. And so if you, like you said, if you're not tuned in to that, find a way to watch it,
Mhm.
because I think it's going to be a really high level basketball game.
Yeah, this is a matchup that without the rankings, without the undefeated,
Yep.
it would already been electric. It would have been fun regardless, just because the fan bases. Then you add in the stakes, the added stakes, because there's already stakes with it. But yeah, I'm to echo your point. I think Addie Brown has been a player that's just been pretty consistently overrated or underrated. Excuse me, not
Underrated.
overrated.
Yep.
Whoa, gotta get that one cooked up. Yeah, just overlooked is what I was trying to say. I mixed the two there. But because to me, like, this is a player that can get you triple double on any night, and also I think importantly, not that she shoots a very high volume, but the capability of shooting the three and helping space the floor for Audie Crooks, and because you don't have like Jada Williams isn't a 3-point shooter in that type of way, and just making sure you find that spacing, I think is important to help open up, like you mentioned, whether it be the passes, whether it just opens up the floor generally. Because Iowa's defense is stout, and I'm very interested in how they could try and shut down Audi, based on one, like you mentioned, actually just how they could post play. They can kind of to a degree match up with her in Ava Hayden,
Right.
but also just in general, the Iowa defense is strong. Like it is a stout defense, which feels like such a flip from what we kind of grew accustomed to with Iowa. And like I think people kind of have to almost re-engineer like what is Iowa women's basketball now? Because yeah, they still have offense 100%, but that's not what you the foundation of this team is the defense. And,
Hmm.
and I think seeing that against Audi and how they try and play that is going to be very interesting. And I think if Iowa State's able to knock down some of those 3-pointers, that can completely open up and force kind of Iowa's hand and like, okay, we have to respect this. I don't know if Iowa's going to be respecting it from the jump in this game. It might have to be kind of beaten into Iowa in that way of where they make the threes and space the floor. Because obviously, Audi Crooks is going to be at the top of the scouting sheet with the absolute dominance that she's been showing in these early games. But as you mentioned, not haven't really had like that full matchup where it's like, okay, this we have a player here that can try her best to stop Audi Crooks, and that's easier said than done, right? And it's not
Yep.
just as simple as having size. So I'm very interested in this one in terms of again what that matchup looks like down low and how Audi can produce just like numerically when you have that defense that is a little bit more capable of actually playing the defense that is needed to try and stop
Yeah.
Audi Crooks. And for Iowa, like as you mentioned, I want to see like obviously Ava Hayden has been really, really strong, almost averaging a double double so far this season. I'm
Hmm.
ready to kind of see like the emergence of Hannah Stolke and like as a scorer, and truly kind of go and be that dominant number one option. And I feel like there's a level of versatility that we haven't been able to like, kind of unlock with Hannah Stolke as the number one option. And man, what a day to do it
Yeah.
would be tomorrow, in this major game. So Hannah Solke is a player I'm certainly watching this one for obvious reasons, just on terms of her responsibility, but also again just leveling up, like almost averaging a double double in her own right with 11 and 8. But me personally, I want to see Hannah Stolke score the ball more than just 11 points per game. I want to see what level up you can see over the course
Hmm.
of the season. And again, can't think of many better games to do that in than this one right here against Iowa State.
Absolutely.
And I'm so stoked for this one, and this is again another game where we're really dwindling down the undefeated teams here over the course of this season, and
Mhm.
one of these teams will leave not only with bragging rights but with a 0 in that loss column, and it'll be a very very fun one. So if you clear the calendar for tomorrow, like this is a game that you're going to want to get eyes on. It's going to be electric. But speaking of just kind of staying on theme here with the undefeated teams, I think there's still a couple of teams that are undefeated where obviously there's differing schedules and non-con and so on and so forth. But have there been any teams that have surprised you in terms of being undefeated here so far?
Well, I think they play tonight, and that would be Arizona State.
Mm,
I don't now. This is their first P4 game
sure.
tonight, and so I think that will give us a little bit better idea of where they truly are
Hmm.
because they have had some decent tests, but I think in terms of just size, athleticism, what you see on a night in and night out basis once you get into conference play, that's going to be a little bit more indicative
Hmm.
what we see tonight. And they're taking on a Penn State team that sits at 6-2, and really they've had some good games. They've
Yeah.
had a decent schedule, and so I think when you have Gracie Merkel in the middle, that's always going to be really interesting to kind of see how Arizona State navigates that in terms of the way they play, because they don't have necessarily a ton of size
Hmm.
to match up with her. And then you obviously have Kaomi McMillan, who can score the ball on the wing, for Penn State as well. So to me, Arizona State, though, like we said, Gabby Elliott is a Penn State transfer, so going back there, I think that always is interesting to
Hmm.
see how those play out, because sometimes individually you tend to have a little bit more motivation, but where is that put? Is
Sure.
that put to good use, or is it more, sometimes you come out of the gate a little out of sync
Yeah.
and trying to do too much. And so that to me, the Arizona State one is surprising. And do you have any thoughts on them?
Yeah, well, I put you. We just saw Janiah Barker. What going back to your
Yeah,
former
yeah,
school can look like, and how that
yeah,
motivation can be. Yeah, Arizona State. I was very excited to see like what this team would look like, and again, obviously, as you mentioned, this will be their first P4 opponent. So like this is kind of like a step up in terms of tests, and certainly Penn State is a team with Merkel and McMillan that can just score, right? And it's the defense for Penn State that's been the problem, not the offense
right.
by any means. And so it's a very unique test in that type of way, and the I really didn't know where my expectation would be for Arizona State. Obviously, year one with the new coach can always be weird, just generally speaking. No matter where you're at, it can be tough to do. And Molly McMillan, even just already like this is already a plus, right? To be able to say you're undefeated at this point for Molly Miller is massive. And it's a play style thing. It's about setting a foundation for your program, and it can be hard to do, frankly, when you're losing games. There's coaches that can really get a lot of growth out of losing, and there is growth to be had from losing. But being able to kind of start off with this amount of wins is very, very impressive for any coach, let alone one that's in her first year at a new school,
Yeah.
at a new level as well, a new conference. And so I'm very impressed just in general with Arizona State. We'll see where the season goes from here and whatnot, but just off early returns, you got to be feeling good if you're Arizona State, and certainly if you can go and pick up this win, just again, just your first P4 opponent, a team that has legit players that are can go and score the ball. This will be a great win for them. And I think the other team that's really sticking out to me personally, just in general, when it comes to some of these undefeateds, Texas Tech. It was a team that lost some players in the
Yep.
portal and have gone and are right now 10-0, two SEC wins, one ACC win, and I had frankly no expectation at all for Texas Tech. Like that again, you have your players transfer out, and to be able to go and bounce back in this way and have a kind of a difference here is you have those Power Four wins. You have three of them at that
Yeah.
to go and get some of those wins feels really really good for a Texas Tech program that again has not had the best results ever. We'll see what happens in Big 12 play and frankly like how legit that they kind of end up being, but to be 10-0 at this point, again, there's not many undefeated teams left, and to say that you are one of those is a legit accomplishment here for any team, frankly, across the country. Have you had any thoughts with Texas Tech, or was there another team maybe that you're looking at from these maybe surprise undefeateds?
Yeah, well, tech I've talked about a couple times on here just because I think this when you look at this Texas Tech team, I think the knock was yes, they've never played, they don't have a super strong non-conference
Mm,
schedule. They get to the conference schedule, but I think this what to me was different about this Tech team is they have very convincing non-conference
mhm,
wins
mhm,
against lesser opponents. And in the past, I feel like those scores were a little bit closer than they should
sure,
be, so they were still escaping maybe with wins, but when you look at the overall big picture, it wasn't like dominating. And I've said several times, obviously Jalen Bristow has been incredible. You're kind of seeing her back to, the player I think everyone thought she would be
mhm,
coming out of high school. I obviously watched a lot of her freshman year at Iowa State. I thought she had incredible promise.
mm,
And then last year she went to Tech and just was, didn't have a bad season, but nothing that was certainly eye popping.
sure,
And then this year has really come out of the gate for them and has been really good through 10 games. The addition of Snuda Collins, I think the Ole Miss transfer has really been the game changer
mhm,
and kind of a piece that I would say in the past Tech didn't necessarily have in
mhm,
terms of her kind of game. And I think that's been really the key component for that Tech team. But like you said, I think it's going to be really interesting, when they get into conference play, what that looks like. But they do have, like you said, three P4 wins and more dominating wins over lesser opponents. So that to me was kind of, why I've been on, higher on them than in
sure,
years past. The other one, I think, just because I think they've played a fairly tough schedule and they've had some injuries, even though they did have a heralded transfer class, is Maryland.
mm,
Um, and that is a team that I think is going to continue to win games. Now, I don't think they'll stay undefeated.
sure,
We talked a little bit about the double overtime game, against Minnesota, but Brenda Fries has coached for a long time and she's been
yeah.
very successful. And so I think that to me is one who knows how to kind of just keep the train moving even when you do miss the pieces. So that to me was, I think Maryland being undefeated just with the schedule and the injuries has been surprising.
Yeah, one thing about Brittany Freeze is that she just gets the most out of whatever it is that she has available, and we've seen that in different forms, whether it be players transferring out, and she has to kind of whatever is working there, bringing players in from the portal over the years, dealing with like whatever it is. Maryland ends up being solid no matter what. And like that's taking, different tiers of like national, relevance, if you will, like in terms of like where those teams stack up. But you're just never questioning, I guess to me, like a Maryland team being solid. Like there was
Hmm.
such a strong program foundation with this that even with these injuries this year, here they are again, like in the top 10, undefeated. Like it's such a feather in the cap for Brendan Freeze, even just early on here in the season, to stay undefeated. And goodness gracious, that double overtime game. I mean that was I can't frankly I cannot believe they're undefeated right now. If I'm
Yeah.
being completely honest, because
They
that
probably
game,
can't either, Tyler.
like
So
I have you ever seen anything like that? Like I mean, like that ending of that game was just otherworldly to me.
yeah, it's one of those rare things that happen in basketball. I said before we hopped on here, like if anyone remembers the UNI Texas A&M men's
Mm,
game from the NCAA tournament, I think it was like a 15-point deficit
mm,
in A&M. It was just one of those things where it's a snowball effect, and it's just like every wrong thing if you're the winning team keeps happening, and if you're the losing team, every right thing, like every
mhm,
bounce, every whistle, like all the things. But I think what was awesome about that, if you're a Maryland Terrapin fan, is
mhm,
obviously the belief that
sure.
you could still win, because there's a lot of times in those situations where it's like you practice them, you do all the scenarios, but when it comes to a game to actually execute every late game situation that you've worked on, I think again, credit to Brenda Fries and her staff,
Mhm,
because when you see that play out in a real game, it's like, okay, all the things we work on
sure.
actually, come to fruition. But if you're a Minnesota Gopher, it's like, man, that's one you let slip away, and you don't in the moment want to know or hear how much learning and growth you can have
Yeah.
from that. But I think that's, that's the life lessons of basketball, right?
Mhm,
Is
mhm.
that there's always something to be learned and to grow from. But to say you've really ever seen that happen, it's very, very rare. I mean, you look at win probabilities all the time. I think that was probably like 99.99999,
Yeah,
so that was a tough one. But again, credit to Maryland, because I think a lot of times in those situations it's hard to have the belief that
sure.
it can be done, and to see it, if they're in those situations again going forward, you expect, if you're them, the same result.
Yeah, I know, like, that was, like, the perfect, like, characterization of, like, exactly why with the if Brandon Freese is there, I'm expecting results from Maryland, and it's like
Hmm.
things like that just seem to happen, and it's not an accident that they happen
Yeah.
either, and that is such a testament to again what Brendan Freese has been able to build at Maryland, and no matter what it is, no matter who's on the court, transferring in, transferring out, injuries, they just always seem to make something happen,
Yep.
and that's why they're excited to watch. That's why they're undefeated right now, 11-0, and one of the last teams standing to do so. We'll see tomorrow night who stands between Iowa and Iowa State. But we'll be back here tomorrow with another Her Hoop Stats podcast. As always, every weekday, a new episode coming your way. And make sure you follow Her Hoop Stats on all the social medias, Instagram, X, Blue Sky, you think it, you name it, we're on it. So make sure you go follow, make sure you rate, subscribe all across the board, whatever platform you're listening on, and we'll talk to you soon.